It's a joy to be with you on this Monday of the Word of Encouragement, and I trust you had a great weekend. So thankful for the Lord's blessing. The Lord's Day is such a joy to be a part of, and I do encourage everyone, if you want to be encouraged, be in church as much as you can be and let the giftings of God's people really minister to you. Today I'd like to look at the final chapter of Ephesians. Speaking of the church, this epistle really does deal with the doctrine of the church in our age, the great mystery of the church, and how God has brought Jew and Gentile together and is showing forth his glory through the church. And here at the end of the epistle, very interesting perspective that I think helps us as we face potential troubles in the future. At any time we could be facing those. And we read in verse 18, after you have the spiritual warfare section and the different pieces of the armor of God, we read, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit. This is verse 18 of chapter 6. And watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints, and for me, and here's what I want you to see, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I'm an ambassador in bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. The Apostle Paul looked at his circumstances not as negative, being in prison and suffering for Christ, but instead as a divine appointment to accomplish God's work that was divinely given right there in that setting, in the very center of the Roman Empire. The Apostle Paul speaks of himself as an ambassador in bonds. That's quite a statement. In other words, he was officially sent from the ruler of the universe as an ambassador to those that are in prison, those officials that were part of that whole proceeding. He did not see himself as a victim, as someone that needed to feel sorry for himself, someone that needed to be fearful, but instead he had a cause, and he took the circumstances that he was facing as God's great opportunity for him. Now, as you read this, you realize he knew he needed prayer. He needed to have utterance because he knew how difficult it was, and that he needed that boldness, that openness to make known the gospel. And then he says again in verse 20, that I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. So it wasn't that he was just oblivious to the pressures. He knew very much that he could lose his life if he said what he needed to say, and he was being dealt with as Roman prisoners are dealt with. And yet he really did have a perspective of divine mission, even in the midst of a difficult situation. So friends, no matter what we face in life, we need to realize that every situation, and especially the bad ones, often are open doors for opportunity we would never have. They are divine appointments in which people can be reached. For instance, physical problems lead us to meet medical personnel and other people, or situations in which we have to go out and do things we don't normally do to fix problems give us an opportunity we never have. We need to be an ambassador all the time for the King of Kings. And if we do, we'll stay encouraged because it's a privilege to serve the Lord.